DLC alone. But outside of that, before that dropped yesterday, I spent a good month and a half alternating between MegaMan Zero collection and the MegaMan Battle Network collection. I've been on a real Mega Man kick lately. So I played MegaMan Zero 1 and 2. I've beaten both of those. And I started Zero 3. And then the Battle Network came out like right as I was finishing up 2. So that's when I started flipping. I actually beat and 100%ed MegaMan Battle Network 1, which I don't know if you've played. Have you played the first Battle Network game?
Not the first one. I started with 3 blue.
Oh, you started with the best one, basically. Between 3 and 6, it's a toss-up in the fandom which one's the best. But you don't have to play 1. You could completely skip 1 as someone who's now 100% in the game. There is no reason to play 1. It's completely obsolete. It's kind of like playing Pokemon Red and Blue on the Game Boy when you could just play Fire Red and Leaf Green. Or Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Like, there's so many better ways to experience Kanto outside of the... Gold and Silver, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, go through Kanto in those games. Like, there's 9 different ways you could play Kanto outside of the original games, and it's just not worth it going back, unless you want the nostalgia. It's really the only reason. There's no, like, super in-depth story you're missing out on. You know, it's the first entry in the series, so there's a lot of jank involved, and just a lot of goofiness and silliness, and just the way a lot of mechanics work were not a lot of fun, and I'm just going to say thank God for Buster Max mode, because that would have been tedious without it. I do have one thing to point out, though. Are you familiar? You played 3, so you might have used this, but you know how there's a chip trader in the game?
Yeah.
Where like you input 3 or 10 chips, depending on the common or the rare one, and it's like a lotto, it's a gotcha.
Bit of a gotcha, yep. Yeah.
So the funny thing happened in Mega Man Battle Network 1, there was a battle chip that was unobtainable by normal means. You had to Game Shark, Action Replay, or I was reading online, some people said that you could send your cartridge to Capcom and they would download the chip for you. It was the chip for Bass, who was the secret final boss of the game. You had to complete your chip library for. It's like playing Legends Arceus. You have to collect all the Pokemon before you can fight Arceus. It's kind of like one of those deals. But the chip for Bass could not be obtained in the original game. Well, in this game, it's one of the download like extra codes that they include in the Legacy Collection, which I thought was super cool. So you could just get it. It would be like if you could get the Eon ticket and the Southern ticket in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald Pokemon. Those event items that just you couldn't get normally.
Or how the Virtual Console versions of Crystal had the Celebi.
Exactly.
GS Ball event after the Elite Four. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's very similar to that, where you could finally access those things. So it's like a lot of those events that held a lot of mystique back in our childhood, because the internet wasn't as big as it was now, where you could just easily look up a video of what that looked like. It's kind of cool being able to experience it legitimately without having to cheat your way in. So all this to say, with a chip trader and Bass, the reason I had to set this stage here and give this long-winded story is because I actually got a Bass chip in the chip trader. You couldn't get a Bass chip in the chip trader in the original games, but there is a system in the game where it gives you a higher chance to obtain a chip if you already own it. So halfway through my playthrough, I got a second Bass chip just trying to complete my my network. And there was no restrictions in Battle Network 1 for, like specific chips. You could load up your folder. The only restriction was up to 5 Navi chips. So I had 2 Bass chips in my folder for most of my playthrough. And then in the post game, when I was, cleaning up loose ends and getting the rest of the chips, I was using the chip trader to try to get some of the missing ones, because you could save scum them in Battle Network 1. It didn't force you to save like it did in later games. So
wow.
And the loading is super quick in the Battle Network collection. And I was save scumming for new chips, and I got a 3rd Bass chip from the rare chip trader. So I ended the game with 3 Bass chips in my folder. It was the most.
Are those OP?
They are. It's one of the best chips in the game. It does 200 damage to the entire field.
Wow.
And it freezes time when it does it. So it's like they can't even dodge it.
And nobody's resistant to it, right? You could just use it.
Nope. I think the only way you could resist it is if the little cannonball enemies that don't open their mouth until they shoot a thing out, and that's when they're vulnerable. I think those guys could resist it, but outside of that, it was free damage, and it was the most powerful chip in the game that wasn't a program advance. So most Navi chips, even their highest level, the level 3s would do like between 130 and 150, depending on which one. So I think Sharkman V3 was one of the best chips in the game, but he's really hard to get because he was hard to fight. He did 130 damage to all 3 rows, and that was the best chip you could obtain originally, and base does 200.
It's a really cool game, but there is an RNG factor that you have to think about when you play it, and that I feel like attributes to the difficulty depending on what you end up getting.
I agree. There's a percentage for everything. You have to get a high buster rank or high busting, virus busting rank to get the chips, and even then, you're not guaranteed that chip. It's only a percentage to increase, and some of them. Talk about RNG. There was a few chips that only had like a 3% drop rate on a rank 9. So it goes up to rank 10 and then it's rank S. But in order to get 10 and S, you had to do a double or a triple delete. So if you're fighting that enemy where it only spawns a single one, the highest rank you can get on that is 9. So there was a couple chips that were really tedious and difficult to obtain outside of the chip trader because you only had a 3.5% chance to get it to drop when you fought it by itself, which was its most common form of spawning. So yeah, skip Battle Network 1. I did start Battle Network 2. I haven't gotten far in it, but I did play like 2 hours, and it was immediately apparent how much of an upgrade it was over Battle Network 1, just from a graphic standpoint, the music, the quality of life changes they made from 1 to 2. And I can't wait to dive into the rest of the games now that I've gotten to the good parts. This is the one I remember because I started with 2. I never actually beat it. The final boss was too hard for me as a kid. But yeah, Battle Network, MegaMan Zero.